Is Israel's problem the lack of a war plan? Is a ground invasion in Gaza even viable? The ongoing ground invasion in Gaza has raised critical questions about the feasibility of its ambitious military plan. In the past 2 days alone, Israel has suffered the loss of at least 15 soldiers as its forces push deeper into Gaza, targeting dozens of sites linked with Hamas rulers. The toll of this excursion is becoming evident. Israel says its objective is to completely disengage from Gaza once it is satisfied that Hamas has been defeated. The Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has even talked about a new security regime there, one that would eliminate Israeli responsibility for daily life in Gaza. And this could extend over months. But the central question remains, is it a realistic strategy? Can Israel truly achieve its goals in Gaza? And what is the strategy guiding its actions? The deaths of 15 Israeli soldiers were the first casualties inside Gaza publicly confirmed by Israel's military since its ground invasion began. Fighting has reportedly intensified, and Israeli forces have pushed closer to Gaza City. Meanwhile, in Israel, where military conscription is mandatory, the soldiers' names and faces have been prominently featured on news websites and broadcast live on television. On Tuesday, Israeli forces claimed to have taken control of a Hamas military stronghold in Gaza, Gaza's Jabalia, reporting the elimination of more than 50 militants. This operation unfolded in a densely populated residential area, resulting in widespread devastation. Images from the scene depicted ordinary Palestinians walking through the rubble, desperately searching for survivors. Tragically, the attack resulted in the loss of many lives and left hundreds injured. So I ask again, what's the goal? Because clearly the reality on ground paints a different picture. According to the regional security experts cited by Reuters, there is a clear lack of an endgame. Israel's approach involves dropping thousands of bombs and destroying infrastructure, but the absence of a concrete exit strategy raises concerns. The aim is to destroy Gaza's infrastructure, even at the cost of high civilian casualties. It is to push Gaza's people towards the Egyptian border and go after Hamas by blowing up their maze of underground tunnels. But can the ground invasion meet Israel's ambitions, its aim? The ground invasion is riddled with risks, particularly given the house-to-house urban fighting required when entering the Gaza Strip. This places civilians in the area of significant risk. What about Hamas? It also has a sizable military wing with more than 25,000 members and an extensive social welfare infrastructure known as Dawa. They reportedly have 80,000 to 90,000 members. They are expected to leverage their network of tunnels for attacks on Israeli forces. Israelis are being warned to prepare for an extended war, with a record 465,000 reservists mobilized to support, 169,000 active duty troops. But the pressing question is, how long can Israel sustain its campaign, especially as international pressure mounts for a ceasefire? You see, Israel has two stated goals. One, bring back its hostages safe. Number two, destroy Hamas. But even if these goals are achieved, neither Israel nor its closest ally, the United States, seems to have given much thought to what would come next for Gaza. According to reports, the US has also stressed on the need to focus on a post-war plan for Gaza. Arab countries are also alarmed that Israel has no clear plan for the future of the Palestinian enclave that it is bombarding. Hamas's surprise attack on Israel on October 7th underscored just how little control Israel has over Gaza. It was not just an intelligence failure, it was an operational failure, as well as a strategic failure. Israel has fought 3 previous conflicts with Hamas, in 2008-2009, in 2012 and in 2014. Israel launched limited land invasions during 2 of those campaigns, but unlike today, Israel's leaders never vowed to destroy Hamas once and for all. In those 3 previous battles, just under 4,000 Palestinians and fewer than 100 Israelis died. Look at the numbers now. What's more, there is less optimism in the US also that Israel will be able to completely destroy Hamas. And now even its ally, the US, has doubts. Will Israel be able to completely destroy Hamas? Weaken it, yes, but not completely destroy it. And if Hamas were to be weakened, there will be a power vacuum. Who will fill it? Israel pulled its army and thousands of settlers out of the Gaza Strip in 2005. It says it has no intention to govern Gaza. US President Joe Biden has also said it would be a big mistake. So then, what's the end game for Israel? Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has his work cut out. Whatever the outcome of the war, he will have to ensure that a similar attack never happens again. Meanwhile, a tragedy in the Indian capital, New Delhi, has shocked people. Last weekend, a documentary filmmaker died after his motorcycle collided with another bike. For almost 30 minutes, he lay bleeding on the road in South Delhi's Panchsheel Park locality. Several passers-by gathered around, but appallingly, not one of them took him to a hospital. 30-year-old Piyush Pal got no help from people till it was too late. It gets worse. Someone from the crowd allegedly stole his belongings. He was robbed while bleeding to death. A friend of the filmmaker has claimed that his life could have been saved if he received timely help. He says people gathered to click pictures and left the 30-year-old bleeding. Imagine that. What has happened to us? Is there no respect for human life anymore? This live and let die attitude shows how low humans can stoop. As per claims, gadgets including his camera, which is any filmmaker's prized possession, was stolen from the spot. The lack of empathy is profoundly disturbing. Clinical psychologists say people are in a rush to pursue their goals, which are more important than helping someone in need. The self-absorbed selfishness is on display everywhere. And it seems there is a complete lack of societal connect. We are staring at a complete sense of social detachment and responsibility. Road crashes are an epidemic in India. Here's what the World Bank says. With only 1% of the world's vehicles, India accounts for almost 10% of all crash-related deaths. As per the Indian Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, in the last 10 years, road accidents have killed over 1.3 million people. According to the Law Commission of India, 50% of these victims died of preventable injuries and could have been saved if they had received care on time. The role of the bystander is critical in providing emergency care to the victim, and India is a Good Samaritan protection law. Section 134A of the Motor Vehicles Act protects Good Samaritans and says they shall not be liable for any civil or criminal action if they help reach an accident victim to a hospital on time. The Delhi tragedy could have been avoided, perhaps, if he had received care in time instead of being robbed while dying. I wouldn't be telling you this story tonight. As the world watches the Israel-Hamas war closely, we must not ignore the other war. Because today, Ukraine has endured the heaviest Russian shelling of 2023. Russian bombardment hit over 100 Ukrainian settlements just in a span of 24 hours, leaving entire towns and villages devastated. This comes at a time when the Western world, led by the United States, has been occupied with the conflict in West Asia. Europe also seems to be getting war-weary. And most importantly, the situation on the ground is not looking good for Ukraine. Ukraine's commander-in-chief has signaled a new phase in the war with Russia, which will potentially allow Moscow to rebuild its military strength. The shift comes amid reports that North Korea has supplied Russia with 2 months' worth of artillery shells. Ukraine also reported a Russian attack on an oil refinery in Kremenchuk, a central industrial city. There were no casualties, but it took almost 100 firefighters several hours to put out the fire. Meanwhile, in northeastern Kharkiv, the overnight shelling killed one person and another was killed in the southern Kherson region. As winter approaches, Ukraine is increasingly concerned that Russia will intensify its attacks. Moscow has shifted from a defensive stance during Ukraine's counteroffensive to a more aggressive posture. In the coming weeks, there is a growing fear that Russian forces may target Ukraine's energy infrastructure, same as last year, just ahead of the harsh winter months. A fear now confirmed by Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council Secretary, Oleksiy Danilov. He told a local TV channel that Russia was preparing attacks against Ukraine's key infrastructure once the temperatures get lower. He said, and I quote, "They will attempt to strike at our critical infrastructure facilities which ensure daily activities." But the Ukrainian official says that the country is prepared and that allies were providing additional air defenses. According to one of Ukraine's closest allies, the United Kingdom, Russia was stockpiling missiles to meet their goal this winter. Ukraine's eastern front lines are seeing fierce fighting, with Russian troops making advances on Thursday. Ukrainian forces said that they repelled a new Russian assault near the town of Vuhledar. It is situated in eastern Donetsk. It is a Ukrainian-held bastion located at a strategic intersection between the eastern and southern front lines. It has seen some of the bloodiest fighting of the 20-month-old war. According to the Ukrainian military, Russia was trying to regroup after losses near another flashpoint city, Avdiivka. They fear more Russian attacks here. Russian troops are trying to encircle Avdiivka. They renewed the push to capture the embattled town in mid-October by overwhelming Ukrainian positions with constant barrage of artillery and waves of troops and fighting vehicles. Ukraine's top general has openly acknowledged Russia's strategic advantage. In a conversation with the British newspaper, General Valery Zaluzny admitted that the conflict has evolved into a World War I-style stalemate. He emphasized Moscow's superior numbers. He underscored the urgent need for the Ukrainian army to acquire new military capability and tech innovation to break out of the war phase. And General Zaluzny's statement appears accurate at this point. If the current situation on ground persists, Ukrainian troops, fatigued after months of counteroffensives, may find no rest. A prolonged attritional warfare carries big risks. The Ukrainian general has emphasized it will only benefit Russia. Almost 5 months after Ukraine launched its counteroffensive, the situation on ground has not really changed. Ukraine has not made a serious breakthrough. Its operations have faltered due to heavily mined Russian defensive lines. Fighting is expected to slow down as the weather worsens. Ukraine struggle to sustain ally support. As if the current challenges are not enough, Ukraine now faces the risk of losing the sympathy of its allies. There's a growing sense of war fatigue in Europe, and now the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, has openly admitted it. In a call she believed was with officials from the African Union, she mentioned that Europe is becoming wary of the Ukraine conflict. Take a look.
Sul lavoro, hai voglia di parlare di salario minimo, come se risolvesse il problema. L'unico modo di risolvere il problema, I can tell I will do my best, as always. I'll do my best for my greatest.
However, it is important to know that the call took place in September and was recently released online by Russian comedy duo Vovan and Lexus. They are accused of being a pro-Kremlin tool of information warfare, targeting high-profile Western figures. They have criticized Russia in the past for the Ukraine war. In response, Giorgia Meloni's office issued a statement expressing regret. Take a look.
Questo è il tempo della responsabilità. Questo è il tempo in cui, se si vuole far parte della storia, si deve capire.
The regret was over her being deceived by an imposter posing as the head of the African Union. She was pranked. However, this incident comes at a time when Ukraine's President Zelensky is urging the West to maintain its unwavering support for Ukraine. Zelensky said that the scariest thing is that some parts of the world have grown accustomed to the ongoing war in Ukraine, and he's not wrong. There is visible war fatigue. It is scary, especially for Ukraine and its allies, if the current war endures into the winter months. And to discuss this and a lot more, joining me now on the show is Mr. Seres Sameni. He is the director of the European Resilience Initiative Center. He's joining me now live from Berlin. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having invited me today.
Right, my first question to you. Ukraine says Russia attacked more than 100 settlements in just 24 hours. This is all happening at a time when the world is focused on Gaza. Is there war fatigue in Europe at this point? I say this because of what just happened with the Italian Prime Minister.
Well, of course, there is war fatigue in Europe, and of course that many European nations would wish that this war is over, and many are asking the question what to do further. But I don't think that many European nations are really ready to throw Ukraine under the bus. Of course, some of the European nations are, like Hungary, one of the nations which are, since the early this full-scale invasion, on the side of Russia. or since recently Slovakia, where absolutely pro-Russian prime minister has been elected recently. But if you look on countries like Poland or Germany or the Baltic states or the others, there are no serious politicians who would say that we need to stop our support for Ukraine. There are some voices who say, like, what can be done? We need to be realistic and not to promise too much. But it is not the discussion about the full stop.
Right. If this war does go into the crucial winter months, what does this mean for Ukraine?
Well, you already mentioned quite correctly, from my perspective, that Russia will try to do what Russia didn't manage to do last year. I mean, to switch off the Ukrainian power grid and to destroy Ukrainian electricity supply. But I think that it would be this time, it would be harder for Russia to achieve this goal, not only because Ukraine has more trained anti-air defense. Just remember, last year in October, Ukraine didn't have any IRIS-T, any Patriot, and any other sophisticated anti-air systems. Now Ukraine has them. And Ukraine now also developed its own systems of drones and can retaliate. So if Russia would try to hit Ukrainian energy grid, then Ukraine would do the same, at least at the border regions in Russia. I don't say that Putin cares about if his citizens in Bryansk or Kursk or other regions are freezing. He's not, of course. But at least it would cause some certain logistic problems, maybe some public outrage in Russia. And anyway, Ukraine will have a feeling they control the situation.
Right, Mrs. Sameni, thank you so much for all your analysis, and thanks for joining us on Gravitas tonight.
Thank you so much.